Did you know that indie hackers and content creators are simply two sides of the same coin? Welcome back to the Idea Supply Chain, where we take a look at where ideas come from and what makes those ideas valuable. Today, I wanted to explore the confluence of indie hackers and content creators because I think really ultimately both groups of people are individuals who have identified opportunities online for creating a world in which they have freedom, autonomy, and unlimited potential upside. So there's a few different things here. So first of all, there's the indie part of it and, kind of the creator aspect as well. It's all about the individual and having this ability to have control over your own destiny. When I'm in jobs, I have been in jobs in the past, it's like you've got this very, very limited cap on how well you're going to move up. There's a limited number of spots on the ladder above you. Sometimes you got to wait for someone to leave, and then it's a big competition to see who can fill that spot. Or maybe if you're lucky, you're getting like a 2% raise every year, which doesn't do shit, right? So, when I was looking at the other side of it, right? The greener grass that's on the other side of being a content creator, I suddenly saw this great, vast, untapped potential upside that I could just grab onto. It'd be simple. Replace my salary through content. It's easy, right? Turns out, no, it's hard as fuck, but the dream is there. And I, for one, fully bought into the dream of being an empowered, autonomous individual online, using my knowledge to help people, to educate them, all sorts of things. Indie hackers, the same way. Okay, you're coding day in and day out. You see all these people launching these apps and tools and making thousands and thousands of dollars a month. Well, I could do that. Again, bit harder than perhaps anticipated because I've been doing that too. And there's a lot of luck that goes into it. But you also make your own luck over time because you get better at identifying opportunities. You get better at launching. You gain experience in a wider range of skills than you do typically in your normal programming job. Same thing as a content creator, where you might go there from like the marketing side or the creative side and say, oh, I've got all these skills, I can use these. But there are all these missing skills that we just don't quite realize how important they are when it comes to being a successful entrepreneur, which is ultimately what both indie hackers and content creators need to be. There's a learning curve there. If you're not versed in the world of entrepreneurship, you're probably going to stumble. And that's okay, because that's how we learn. Now, we see that both groups are going after this kind of unlimited potential upside, right? But what else do they have in common? Well, first of all, they're both operating in, scalable goods. With code scales really well. I can build it once, millions of people can use it for essentially zero change in cost, or at least very low cost marginally. With content creators, it's the same thing. We have this ability to spread our message to a huge audience worldwide. We have potential reach that we've never had before. And that is valuable because it's scalable. I can say one thing and have it received by millions or billions of people potentially. Again, never as easy as just saying that, but there's a lot of leverage. And Naval Ravikant talks about leverage quite a bit in terms of like code, media, or capital. Basically, if you could pay people to do work for you, that's leverage. If you can share your words with people, inspire them, connect with them that way, that's a form of leverage. And then code is leverage because it just does the same thing every time, in theory. And so these types of leverage really give individuals the ability to make way more than they can in a typical employment setting. And again, that's the dream. Now, the good news for both content creators and indie hackers is that it is easier than ever to start creating content or to start building something and deploying it online. The bad news is that makes it harder than ever to get noticed for either. It's becoming more competitive. And unfortunately, a lot of the systems we've designed are kind of winner take all, meaning that there are a few winners and lots of losers in terms of either attention or users. You end up with kind of these exponential outcomes that reward the top 1%. So I do think we actually need better systems in place that aren't quite as winner take all, because they don't need to be. And that's actually one of the cool things about reducing the cost of creation, whether it be, code, content, whatever. You can actually end up with much smaller, more efficient versions of some of these, behemoth software companies that are operating for millions or billions of people a day, because you don't actually need that many users in order to be successful. And in fact, I think there's been this huge inflation on numbers because the internet being so nascent. There are constantly more people coming online, discovering new things about the internet. And so there was this really rapid period of growth, and everybody saw these numbers and said, great, that's what we're all shooting for. And so they tried to kind of monetize, via attention with advertising and things like that, which is actually a terribly inefficient way to monetize. And so as we get individuals and small teams working together to kind of figure out how we can efficiently monetize smaller groups of people, we're actually going to have this kind of fracturing of the software ecosystem, and I believe the content ecosystem, because it's the same thing. And if you've been spending any time on Twitter lately, I know I have, you may have heard me talk about that quite a bit. The feeling is like, I don't really know that I'm getting the most out of being on here right now. And so we're going to see a couple different things. We're going to see, first of all, the ability to kind of customize and control some of these more addictive experiences, because it's just not great for us. But then we're also going to see kind of smaller experiences break out. And as we can actually use AI tools to kind of help us leverage and manage all of these different aspects, I think we're going to get into some really creative software ecosystems. And so, the good news is with competition, there's more communication in play. Because more people are indie hacking, there are more sources to learn about indie hacking. Because more people are creating content, there's more sources of how to create content, how to get your messages out there. Now, there's quite a variety in, how good are these signals that we're getting? The people that are teaching me how to be a content creator, how good are they? Probably not as good as you wish they were. You're going to take a lot of wrong steps. Again, been there, done that. Didn't get a t-shirt, oddly enough. There's probably now a t-shirt bot printing off something. But, I think what we're going to see is that over time, a lot of the... I don't want to call them like con artists, because they're not exactly that. But they do see an opportunity and they jump on it. They see people wanting to become creators. They sell the dream of being a creator. They give you some kind of meaningless drivel that doesn't really mean anything. Oh, be yourself. Be authentic. Great. I'm going to be myself in a corner. Nobody's going to notice. When you're trying to fight for attention online, getting that attention is unfortunately important. It's part of the game right now. And sometimes you have to learn how to be very, very specific in your messaging and understanding who you're talking to and how you're talking to them. Because ultimately what you want to do is you want to build trust. And unfortunately, we look a lot at numbers, and it's easy to trust numbers going up, but those numbers don't necessarily mean anything. Maybe it's signups on a website, or maybe it's followers on Twitter, those numbers might mean something, but the numbers in and of themselves do not. Who are those users? How are they using your app? Who are those followers? How much are they engaging with you? How much do they trust you? If you try to sell them something, will they buy from you? Right? This is all stuff that is much harder to measure. And both content creators and indie hackers are trying to figure out ways to, game it a bit and get their own advantages. I saw somebody the other day on Twitter talking about this idea of faking your MRR stats, so your monthly recurring revenue stats, basically your Stripe graph showing how much money you're making. With the idea being that basically you show this graph ahead of time. Oh, hey, here's my app. It's doing great. And then people see that and they're like, oh, your app must be worthwhile. And so they're more willing to pay for it. And so by kind of lying about how much money you're making, you potentially get more users and start actually building that revenue. I don't actually have any proof as to whether or not that's happening. I suspect it does a bit because revenue screenshots typically get better engagement on Twitter. And I've warned against this in some of my other things when I talk about building in public. But basically, it's an easy thing for people to look at and go, oh, great, they're doing well. Good for you, buddy. And you're likely to get that engagement, but it's not necessarily, again, meaningful engagement. So what does meaningful engagement looks like? It looks like building trust. It looks like creating real relationships. It looks like, talking to users, talking to, potential partners. And this is all kind of coming together in what I think we really need to start focusing in on more, because it's actually very, very hard to be successful as either a creator or an indie hacker. But what if you had one of each? And this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and it's why I've been focusing on becoming both an indie hacker and a creator. Instead of focusing on just one, I've been focusing on both, which means that I have been perhaps slower to be successful in either, but I'm setting myself up for maximum success because I see both sides of the coin that are needed, right? You need the distribution, which is the creation, the content creation, but that tends to be more manual. It tends to be more time dependent, and, requires kind of one skill set, versus the coding, which actually requires less time over time. But it's, typically a higher setup cost. It takes more to get it off the ground initially to create something valuable with it. And so it, it's slower growing than content potentially is. But when you connect the two and you find a creator and an indie hacker who are aligned on who they want to speak to, who do they want to help. And with indie hackers, a lot of them don't actually care that much on who they help. They're looking to build something useful. And one of the best ways to find something useful is talking to creators, learning what their processes are, how they solve the problems they run into. Because there's a lot of earned knowledge there. And when you've got an audience of any reasonable size, it suddenly becomes much easier to actually distribute the stuff you're building. And so as an indie hacker, if you can partner with a creator, that you trust, and again, this is where kind of this trust comes in, because it has to be very much a partnership. It's not one side or the other. Both sides are equally needed. And this is really the opportunity I see for both groups to make their lives a lot easier. And so they're two sides of the same coin, but you still need both sides in order to be successful and to really, decouple individual time from scaling, because when you do it right, you can actually have time-based income based on what you can, create now, what things like that. And then you can also be building a product on the back end that is taking what you know, building it out to scale for an audience. And, you know, a lot of times both creators and indie hackers will end up doing something very similar by, like, you know, doing freelancing or consulting on the side to kind of pay for things while they're getting off the ground, because again, it is hard. And most people who start it don't end up going through with it. And that's why I recommend finding that partnership really as early as possible, because when you're able to do that, you're able to take the load off of yourself as an individual and spread it over a team, which ends up making your life a lot easier. And yeah, it gets rid of the indie part of the dream, but the freedom ends up still being there, because it's kind of a loosely coupled partnership. You can kind of have both sides operating independently, because one of the things you need is, like, you need the audience and you need the ability to direct them into something, but that doesn't actually have to happen all at the same time. You can kind of start collecting an audience and then start, you know, moving some of them over, integrating some of that content periodically. And as I've started to work with creators to build out SaaS products for them, because again, I'm doing exactly what I'm talking about here. This isn't me just saying one thing and then going off and doing another. Like, I believe in this so much, I've shifted my life around completely to live this, because I honestly believe it is the most valuable thing I can be doing at this moment in time. You know, as I'm talking to these creators and trying to help them figure out what they do that's valuable, like, there is so much out there. There are so many things that aren't being automated, that aren't being built, that could serve very, very specific goals. It doesn't have to be a hugely complicated SaaS platform. It can be something very, very simple, very scalable, and pretty easy to build. But a lot of times when we're on our own, we're overcomplicating, we're figuring out all the ways that we can add more and more and more into it, when sometimes it's really about taking away and simplifying, and just doing something pretty basic, because a lot of times that's all it takes to really create value in the world. So that's it for today. Indie hackers, content creators, two sides of the same coin, but ultimately they're both the same at heart. And so either, if you can be both, great. Do both, do everything in one. That's what I'm shooting for. Still not there yet, but I'm getting there. And I do have a partner who's more of a creator. So, you know, I do, again, I'm living what I'm preaching here. It's not just me talking out my ass. This is how I've designed my life, because it's what I believe in. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.